if you have a finance manager on the ground, then you will always need a tax advisor. I rely a lot on tax advisors. Why? Because I feel I cannot, the more I know, the more I know I don't know everything.
Bruce, Bruce.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Bizarre Brews podcast. Today on Bizarre Brews, we're joined by Clara Valero, a global tax executive with over 15 years of experience leading international tax functions across some of the world's most dynamic companies. Right now, she serves as a global head of tax at Emerging Travel Group. Clara is not only a strategic leader, driving cross-border strategy, M&A, and digital transformation, but she's also an educator and mentor shaping the next generation of tax professionals. And that's what we love here at Bizarre Brews. We love people who are shaping what the field and the industry could become. We're excited to dive into her journey, her global perspective on the future of tax, and the lessons she's learned along the way. Thank you so much for joining, Clara. How is everything going? How's the tax year been? Or how is the team doing right now?
Well, yeah, it's tough times. Let's say it's close to year end. So normally when you work in-house, or even when you work as a tax advisor in Big Fours or similar consultancy firms, when year end approaches, tax people get very busy. Also I think it's full year, but year end, it's normally end of the world. So it seems that nothing happens after 1st of December. There is life, there is nothing. But so preparing for this, also we have goals as in-house teams. We have our KPIs and goals, so we also need to complete them before year end. We have to close the books and so on. So it's tough times.
So then for your team, do you guys get at least Christmas time off or the holiday period off?
Yes, we do have. Yeah, I think it's normal Christmas vacation as everyone else. Sometimes depending on where you are, it might be that early January you might need to work, but it might depend on where you work. Depending if you are busy with tax accounting topics, normally when you need to deal with corporate income tax expense calculations and so on and support the accounting teams, then you might need to work also even weekends in January, but I've not been involved in that so far in the recent years.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so then brings you back to public accounting days, right?
Exactly. Yeah, normal days. Yeah, we have time to rest as everyone else. So yeah, we are normal people, despite a bit freak about taxes.
Yeah, so I've in my experience, I've seen so far almost less than 10% of all tax accountants really love taxation as much as that's what they want to they actually see it as fun work. And those are the people who actually who do really well in this space and they go really far ahead. But yeah, thank you so much for joining. So I've seen your resume is really amazing. You've worked at really global tax function across major national corporations all across the world. So why don't you take us back and talk about how did your journey in tax began, and also what inspired you to take on this field?
Sure. Yeah, it's, as you can imagine, it was not on purpose, right? So it was just sort of a coincidence that I started in the tax field. I studied law and economics, so both degrees at the same time, and that's very suitable for tax experts and tax people, right? Because then you need to know about legislations and laws, and of course you need to understand accounting principles. So yeah, first when I was good in tax subject in the university, but yeah, still not my cup of tea, right? So it was just something I like. I love traveling. That's something. So I love to be in contact with international people, and I've always been traveling a lot when I was young. Yeah. Also, I started in transfer pricing, practice in KPMG transfer pricing team in Madrid, and I was there for some months, 1 year, 1.5 years, and then I realized I wanted to learn more about taxes. I really like it. So at that point in time, my partner told me, because I wanted to move to international taxation and learn more about international taxes. Apart from transfer pricing, I love transfer pricing, but I found that in 2 years I had learned all transfer pricing principles already, right? It was back in 2009 or so when all transfer pricing rules were still early stage for Europe, but not so much perhaps for Americas. But Yeah, I found it super interesting. I've been always moved to learn more and more. And then I moved to Deloitte, practice corporate international tax team, right? So it's a mix of projects, international tax projects, corporate income tax assessments, clients, tax compliance, tax risk, tax audits, and everything. So I learned a lot. And then, I realized I love taxes at that point. And then I moved to in-house roles, which I even like more because, I think the role I really love is the in-house tax practitioner, because then you see all the projects from the very beginning till the end. So you feel that you really provide input and value to the company, in the sense that you can finish all projects, then you can guide the teams internally, and you see how everything goes, right? So I think it's very interesting from a professional perspective to see that from the insights of the in-house role as a tax expert. For sure, tax people in the tax advisory firms is great job, but for myself, I like more in-house roles. It's very interesting.
So then, as part of, you said, your international exposure, you lived in Europe and you lived outside of Europe. So how has that international exposure changed your perspective on taxation and your leadership, especially as you've worked at different roles across the world?
Yeah, I think it's very important when you work with international taxes and perhaps other areas, obviously in the businesses. It's very important to be empathetic. You need to learn a lot about different cultures. You need to understand the cultures. You need to understand the people. What is the idiosyncrasy of each of the countries, so that you will better understand the politics as well, because taxes is very linked to politics. And then the local people, you also need to understand how they work, how they are, right? So that you can better get to better outcomes together, despite even if they are tax advisors or local tax teams or even finance teams. I've been work with people from all the continents, and it's can be very different, but it's very important that you adapt to that. So I think taxes are similar in a way, right? So the principles for taxations are very similar. Tax authorities normally try to collect as much money as possible. There's different, that's the truth, right? But we can understand that, right? So it's the first source of income for the governments. We can understand that. And if you are a big company, multinational, they will, target you, and then you will need to defend yourself, and then you will need to be very, very strong in your argumentation. So I think it's very different, but at the same time it's the same. There are some countries for sure in Europe, I don't know, Norway, Sweden, UK, the Netherlands, at some point in time, they were very friendly, and tax authorities super friendly. You can speak to them very directly, emails, phone calls, and so on. If you go to Mexico or Latin America, that's completely different story. If you go to Russia, India, I'm not so, I don't have so much experience, but I've heard also it's very one-to-one, and then you need to have good relationship with the local authorities. So I think it's completely different story. Africa as well. So it's very different. You need to understand that to be well positioned. You need to have very good local teams in the ground to support the company on each of the topics. And
So in your very vast experience and very across the world, any particular projects that came to mind when you were working cross border, when you were working with local tax authorities in different countries, where you're like, oh, okay, I'll remember this project for the rest of my life? Something about those projects do you want to share?
Yeah, for sure. So I got super interesting projects. The ones I can remember normally are linked to tax rulings that we negotiated with tax authorities. Good outcome from Spanish tax authorities, APAs, for example. Also the Netherlands tax rulings, Germany as well. Good outcome also on tax audits in Norway, UK, as mentioned. Not so good with Latin America. Ecuador, Mexico, difficult, but at the end of the day, then you have Prodecom, which is like an ombudsman that they have locally that can help you. But again, you need to be very close to the local teams and very close to the authorities. So in terms of projects, yeah, I think the negotiations with tax authorities, let's call negotiation or tax audits, litigations, and so on, very good outcomes. Some others more challenging in terms of discussion with tax authorities, mainly in Latin America. And then M&As, yeah, as well, very interesting projects, IPOs, spin-offs, also so more on the business side and on the M&A side deals, very interesting as well. Also, I got very good outcomes on refund for VAT credits, R&D credits. For example, in the UK, also they get you some money back if you can prove that you have real R&D development. And then for sure, yeah, many other projects like, lobbying, a lot of lobbying activity in Brazil, also in Spain, France, with digital taxes, which is something relatively new to some tech companies, the Google tax. And yeah, good outcomes or not, I think it's very interesting to discuss with the political parties, try to influence them on the legislation and so on. So interesting projects. And yeah, I think that's more or less.
So then you mentioned IPOs. Not many tax professionals get to see IPOs or like work through IPOs. How was that experience? Were you working in-house? So you were working in-house. So like how was that experience for taking a company go through an IPO process? I know it moves really fast and you have to do a lot of documentation and work to get ready for the IPO. So how does that work from like a tax perspective?
Well, it works in the way that you need to be very well settled. And sometimes it's not the case for these companies that are going through an IPO, because then they are perhaps even in the early stage, they are even startups or close to that. So you need to have a clear view on your tax risk. Then you have a prospectus that you need to serve openly, and then it's there you need to serve all your tax risks. You need to have very good understanding of the likelihood of the amounts and the countries where you can have tax exposure. For sure, you need to prepare all your governance, meaning your tax governance framework, your tax governance model, so your tax policy, your processes, internal controls is very important, so that once you are listed, then you need to prove that you are paying taxes on time, on the fair amount, that you are fully compliant with transfer pricing, documentation requirements, with all tax requirements, So yeah, you need to, and then if you go through a spin-off, I've gone through this IPO once, and sort of twice, but it was not fully IPO. I think let's say twice, in Adevinta and in Sandoz, and both companies were listed in a very short period of time since I joined. In Adevinta I was there for almost 2 years, but in Sandoz it was only like half a year. So we had to prepare. It was first a spin-off from Novartis, so we had to sort of to take over all the responsibilities from the Novartis tax team into Sandoz tax team. We had to prepare on our side to build the tax team on our side alone, for sure, with all the controls, processes, and so on. As mentioned, so a spin-off from Novartis with normally what happens when you are under a spin-off is that you have some sort of temporary support both sides, so that you have some transition service agreements in place with the other party, right? So both cases where I was part of IPOs, first there was a demerger, because those were part of different groups. So same group divided into two businesses or business lines. One is IPO'd, and then normally you get some sort of dependencies with the other party that you need to document in not intercompany agreements anymore, because those are not intercompany agreements, but you need to build all this support for some 2 years period or so. Very critical is for the IP, for example. When you are dependent on the IP from the other party somehow, then you need to split the IP, and then you need to set up, for sure, valuation, IP valuation, reports, and new transfer pricing policy. It can depend a lot on the case, but it's very complex. And the same once you acquire a new group. I was also part of acquisition of eBay when I was in Adevinta, so we were IPO. Then we acquired the classifieds business line of eBay.
Okay.
was also worldwide, and we were doubling the size of Adevinta at that point. That was really challenging because then we had to merge two groups, which were completely different groups, and in a very short period of time, with all the considerations of being compliant with tax perspective. We had to sometimes merge some companies, at the same time take care of all the M&A deal, meaning that the acquisition, transaction costs, how we were going to structure everything. So it's very interesting. It's very, very interesting, but it's at the same time challenging.
So when you have these like integrations coming in and like two groups merging, especially there's like some, let's say like if you're both international companies, then you have like somewhat of similarities of like same countries, then you have to merge those groups together. How was that process for you? And then I think as part of when I was in M&A, that's like a really interesting, that like really interests me because then you get to move around and then you have to like basically play a Tetris over there. We're trying to fit in all the pieces and make sure the transaction goes through, works really well, because like you don't want to trigger taxable gain, or you don't want to have like a adverse tax consequence of going through this process.
Exactly. That's exactly the point. So you need to manage at the same time the structuring piece, which you need to structure the deal in a way that is tax efficient. So try to avoid potential leakage in VAT, corporate income tax, and capital gain taxes for sure. You need to manage also all reporting. Now we have DAX 6 reporting also is important here, because sometimes you might need to report some transactions. And then for sure you need to integrate countries and teams, which is also very important, and processes into your group, the acquiring group. So it's very difficult. Then you need to work. In the case of Adevinta, we had to work on that, I think, from signing date until closing the deal. It was 1 year. 1 year planning the integration. When the deal was closed, then we made this effective. So we had to almost double the tax team with temporary resources. Also because all the teams were still on hold. We were thinking how both groups were going to merge, right, in terms of teams and who was going to work for what. So there was nobody from eBay tax team coming. So we didn't have more tax team members coming. So we had to hire temporary resources. But this team, I mean, there were resources that didn't have a clue about this eBay business, right? So and they were also working partially. So challenging. It's very interesting and motivating, and then you learn very quickly. You also need to plan a lot with the other party. So we had a lot of sort of integration meetings with eBay tax team in the US, explaining to us how they were dealing with things, what were the governance processes. And normally you need to go with a global tax compliance advisor, global transfer pricing advisor. And so you need to manage all that so that everything after day one works same way and you are not missing any deadline, any problem. But of course, there are many implications. Then you need to report changes in the ownership. APAs might even be terminated because of the change in the ownership. Then you need to renegotiate, so all these things I recall were challenging, and for sure all the structuring of the deal very interesting as well. There were new things we had to learn, discuss with local tax authorities. For example, the attribution of transaction costs. That was also, as you can imagine, in this sort of deals, the amount of costs from for investment banks, lawyers, and so on is very significant. So where to put this cost, where to attribute this cost. Normally you will include this cost in the holding entity, the acquiring entity, but this is not efficient from tax perspective, because then you have VAT leakage. Normally holding entities cannot deduct VAT and cannot deduct corporate income tax as well, right? So we thought about allocating partially, based on transfer pricing rules, some of these costs to the sub-holding entities acquiring part of the businesses. And that way we had to discuss with local authorities in the Netherlands, Germany, on how they see that from VAT and from corporate income tax perspective. We had to build some new tax groups as well. And all this normally needs to be sort of discuss upfront with the tax authorities. In Europe, it's very common that you can go upfront and discuss with the tax authorities to see their view before you do implement any structure.
Got it. So it's really interesting. So when you talked about like the different groups integration and like tax teams coming in and you had to hire resources and you've worked in like different industries. So and you've built tax departments from the ground up, right? So what were your biggest challenges like in building like tax departments? And also like what have been some of the core leadership principles and skills that you abide by that help you build out these departments and carry you as like a head of tax?
Yeah, I have to say it's one of the parts of my role that I like a lot. It's one of the ones I really like it. I'm really motivated with this part. Why? Because I love like dealing with people, right? And try to build high performing teams and try to see them grow and try to help them grow. It's very difficult. You need to find exactly what type of expertise you need. It might depend on whether you are in a centralized or decentralized model, what it means. So you might have local teams, local finance teams. It's very common. You might not have subsidiaries everywhere. You might be like a central tax team with local teams, not necessarily tax teams, but local finance teams on the ground that can help you to, discuss with local tax authorities, discuss with tax advisors, at least do something, right? Even prepare tax returns and deal with tax compliance. This is a model, decentralized model. So in that case, the central tax team should be perhaps even smaller. But if you are a pure central, you are under a purely centralized team, which is the case I have now in Emerging Travel Group. We are a fully centralized team. We don't have people, not even finance people on the ground. So we need to deal with everything. It's true that tax compliance falls under under accounting teams. But so you need to understand first, what is your model? What are your needs in terms of tax expertise? Normally, you will always need transfer pricing expert, indirect tax expert, and then you will need international tax expertise. On top of that, you might need tax reporting in case the tax reporting it does not fall under accounting teams in the organization. And then you might need tax litigation expertise and so on. But I think these three basics, so international tax, transfer pricing, indirect taxes, are the key pillars, plus perhaps tax reporting and compliance, but this can be covered by international tax experts. You need to have this expertise because transfer pricing, VAT, or indirect taxes does not have anything to do with that, with the other, right? So you need specific people here, and then international tax people with expertise globally. You might not know about all countries, but you might manage. You know how to manage that, and you know about double tax treaties, the principles, and so on. So I think that's also a separate pillar that you need in your tax team.
It's interesting because in the US, it's the opposite. We hire first for like a tax reporting, a provision person and doing the compliance. And then you might get like someone international, maybe then it goes indirect. And then at the very end, there's an in-house transfer pricing person. So it's the opposite here. Even if you're like an outbound company and you have investments, I don't see a lot of companies having like a in-house, like a tax person.
Yeah, I think it's also because the tax compliance in the US is so complex that you definitely need, and tax reporting is also very complex and completely linked to the compliance part, right? So for sure, you need to be compliant. That's why if you have local teams, normally the tax compliance might fall under local teams or under accounting teams. In my experience in Europe, that's very common, but it might depend. Yeah.
And then what would you say, like, what model works best for which companies? Like, if you have wanted to go for like a decentralized versus a centralized, what kind of structure would fit best for both? I
think each of them has pros and cons. It depends also in the business. And now in Emerging Travel Group, for example, is a fully remote business, a tech company, travel tech. So the teams are completely spread around the world. So I feel the centralized model works better for this business. All the style is more the centralized model. Why? Because I think you have very good pros on the centralized models because you have people on the ground, which I think for tax is very important to have people that is close to the tax authorities. there could be some notifications. Then you need to understand the language. Then you need to understand how the approach of tax authorities locally. And even if they are a director or even if this is a finance manager, it's good to have somebody on the ground, in my view, for tax purposes. But if you cannot, because of this model that is fully centralized and remote, then it's fine to have central model. It's good to have a central model as well. Why? Because then you have fully control. You are accountable for everything. You understand all things, but you also need to spend a lot of time, a lot of money in advisors, local advisors, and then you need to find the trustful advisors on the ground again, because you need people on the ground.
So then when you say like a centralized model, is that when you work a lot with the outside tax providers then in that model? Is that where most of the work is being done? It's outside tax providers that help out. So then essentially your in-house centralized people have to become an expert in almost everything.
Yeah, that's it. That's the point, which is difficult. So that's why at the end of the day, we know in taxes, you cannot be an expert in tax regulations broadly, right? Or globally, it's impossible. You need to have local expertise. But this even happens for local teams. If you have a finance manager on the ground, then you will always need a tax advisor. I rely a lot on tax advisors. Why? Because I feel I cannot, the more I know, the more I know I don't know everything, right? So I think it's important to trust the people that really have the expertise in discussing with local tax authorities, and they know the nuances and the particularities of the local regime and the tax court decisions, and that type of things. I prefer to spend money here and do things better rather than be, have a very large tax team and then with people, as you say, that they don't know what to do. It's very difficult to find the right information and the right source of truth, which we can discuss if you want as well. AI topics and so on for tax people, and where we find the right information for our tax research.
So what's been like your guiding like philosophy and principles of like building teams? What do you rely upon? What kind of leadership style have you like implemented, have learned about that have like guided you throughout your career?
My leadership style is very flexible. I love to build like a culture of trust, flexible, and also talent. I like to promote talent. I like to identify. I feel I can identify talent easily, and I want to promote that the best way. And a lot of trust, transparency, a lot of good communication, and build culture of good relationship among the whole team, where we can support each other as a team, where we all know what is happening, even if this is not under our responsibility. We more or less understand the grounds, and we know that there is a tax audit here or there, and then we communicate with each of the team members easily. So I think trust, talent, and transparency are the 3 pillars in my leadership style. And yeah, I love, as mentioned, I like a lot hiring people and finding the right talent globally. I've worked with people from different cultures and countries in my team as well. And I think it's also interesting learning for both sides to learn how to work with more directly in the team, people from other countries and cultures.
So then do you have like any role models or people that inspired you in your career throughout like some specific instances?
Yeah, I have had some, but I don't think they are public, right? So people I faced during my career are, some people I've really spot as leaders. I really like to, and I think that's so leadership for me, it's key. It's not management, micromanagement. It's like inspiring people, telling them something that really makes them think and makes them feel that they are providing value to the company, that rings the bell in their head, and that they feel motivated for sure, right? So I think I want to transmit all the passion I have in my work to them. So because I think we really do things interesting that contribute to the value of the company, increase it. We provide a lot of efficiencies, and cost savings and for sure a lot of certainty in the sense of tax compliance, risk management, and so on. So I think we are a key asset for the company, and I want to transmit the teams the same. Sometimes they don't feel this is the case. I find it's because they are juniors still, so they feel I don't know exactly what value I'm contributing. But yeah, I try to transmit this and to make them feel this passion as well.
How do you make, yeah, exactly. So like if you're a junior person who's like 1 to 3 years in, like you don't see the importance of tax as much as like person who's been in later, right? They can see they've gone through different things and how it impacts the company. So like how do you tell someone, or how, because tax is not very like passionate about, yeah, very popular, yeah, in that sense. So how do you get someone to be passionate about what they're doing and get really excited? Because the more passionate you are about like the impact, and you see the impact you're making, the better you are going to be at your overall job.
Exactly. But it also depends on the person. Each person has a different character. I've also learned, and I like to understand which is the character for each of the team members, right? Because we might be achievers, which is my case. For example, I love to achieve and I feel motivated when I achieve things, but others are helpers that they prefer to help other stakeholders in the team, in the company. They feel better when instead of them achieving, they help others achieve something, right? So it's try to first understand their character. And then what I would tell a junior member to try to feel attracted by taxes, I think it's international taxes. I think for me, at least, this is very interesting. Why? Because it has a lot to do with culture, politics, economic impacts, and then, business impacts for the businesses. And then you see a lot of the business because you need to be very close to the business. So tax teams are a key part of the business chain. Let's say it this way. We need to be very close to the CEOs, to the CFOs, and provide with good advice. And they need to feel that this is really the contribution is there because we can provide high savings, right? Sometimes it's millions. I don't know how many other teams can really provide that big savings, even being compliant. I'm speaking, without being aggressive, just being compliant. Then because nobody has really thought about that, they are doing that in a way because that was done in the past, and now you come up and then you suggest a different approach, and then that approach can save the company millions of US dollars, euros. I think that is super rewarding for as a professional. It's not only, and then you will never have a day the same as the other. You need to learn, you need to be up to date in all tax legislations because there are tax updates every single day. I receive alerts from all countries. There are many tax alerts, and then at OECD, EU level, UN level as well, right? So at international level, there are many changes, updates, BEPS. We have now Pillar 2, we have Pillar 1, we have so many trends in the tax arena. Always, since I started working almost 20 years ago, it's very interesting. You never stop learning, and it depends on you need to, if you want to be a tax person, you need to like international tax. You need to really be motivated by learning new things, study new things, challenge yourself, and don't have one day same as the other. And for sure, be very close to the business. Understand very well the business. That's very important.
Correct. So yeah, that's really great advice. Like you gotta be like always continuously learning. So let's say like you're graduating college right now, you just got your degree and you think you want to go into tax. Also, I see the profession being at an inflection point. There's changes coming into the industry. First of all, international tax has gotten like so much more complex since like when I've initially started as well. Right. So there's so many changes coming around. There's a lot of tech coming into the industry as well. That is also like some people are scared, like junior people might not have the opportunity to learn as much as like, or have the time to learn as much we did when we first started. And then at the same time, there's a lot more companies, accounting firms going like in the sense that changing from CPA firms into just more tax advisory firms with like the influx of private equity and like those kind of like changes happening there as well. So if you are just graduating college, how should you be set up now to go into the industry and be a successful tax professional?
It depends a bit where. If this is Europe, speaking about Europe, where is my continent, let's say, I think you need to definitely start. My recommendation is to start in Big Fours, tax accounting firms, similar, also including about, as you said, CPAs or similar firms. Also recommendation, I know perhaps not everyone will align with that, but I think you need to work very hard. Why I recommend Big Fours is because
They will make you work really hard.
yeah, so you work very hard, but at the same time you learn from very good professionals, and they give you the opportunity to learn and be part of very interesting projects. That was my case, right? So I learned super quickly in KPMG and Deloitte, and I really enjoyed that part. I felt that I was part of very, very impactful projects, and that was the case with good outcomes on tax audits and so on, despite I was only, like manager level, even at the end part, and junior at the very beginning. But I think working hard, studying hard, normally I would recommend as well some sort of master in taxation or something that you can do, like a post degree master to complete your studies, or some courses as well. It's interesting. Attend conferences. Now online, you can listen to everything, conferences and seminars, even without paying. But you need to be up to date, read alerts, and start figuring out your mind on tax topics. So I think working hard, having a purpose, a clear purpose. You need to understand whether this is for you or not. I know it's difficult, but if you know you like it, you will feel it, and then go for that. Then you will be better. You will become better. I think you mentioned, no, the more you know about something, you do it better. So you need to dedicate time, and then also be patient, because things happen after you.
Yeah, agree. I agree on the patient part, because I feel like tax is something you don't master within 1 or 2 years. That's a slow ride. And then something clicks. Eventually it clicks. For me, it did. First, I was very afraid to like even write in code sections or like sending memos to my managers or senior managers. Well, I was like, oh, what if I got this wrong? Now you have like Copilot and like all the different tools helping you do your tax research, where you can like help out and like get that analysis done before you can present it. Before, we used to have to like go back and search through the code and be like, okay, this is what it is. So yes, eventually I agree, something clicks. So what have been like, and I know you've been talked a lot about leadership qualities and leadership skills, and I think you like emphasizing more on that and like training the next generation. What are some like really good books that have helped you, or like you like going back and reading to it, or like some of those aspects?
Well, honestly, I'm not really reading currently leadership books this way. I try to feel inspired by a podcast and,
Okay.
psychologist speeches, and then LinkedIn. There is a lot of information in LinkedIn resources. So I mean, I read all other type of books, but not really in leadership. I feel like it's natural in me, right? So I like it. I have my own style, and I've been learning and developing this style. I don't focus in leadership development on my side. Perhaps it's a bit not very humble, but I feel this is not one of my weaknesses. So I try to work on some other things and read all the type of books. I think normally podcasts are very interesting, and I can read, but those are normally in Spanish for myself, so I'm not sure I can recommend. But LinkedIn has a lot information on leadership style. So, but I think you need to build your own leadership. You need to feel comfortable with that. And what you were saying before, Adam, about being afraid about sharing something with your manager and so on, that's completely normal. Even this happens to us still, right? So sometimes when I need to jump into a meeting with the CEO, I was like, okay, he's going to him to us, he's going to say, I don't like this, whatever, right? So, but that is normal, and that's why I think it's good, because you are in the good way. The fear, it's common. It happens to all of us, right? So, but you need to accept it and don't get too. I would say don't overthink.
Yeah, I think fear is also great, also in the sense that it makes you want to double check everything. It makes you want to like not get too comfortable with like the solution you came up with. So also always improving, always getting better. And as the great quote goes that says only the paranoid will survive. That's how I always think, like, hey, what if I miss something? So that makes me like want to like double check, because like tax is like going through a minefield. Like, what if like there's not something like there's not an answer where you go like, oh, sorry, I didn't know about that. The tax authorities will be like, okay, but it's in the law, right? So we do not care, especially when it like you miss a filing, or like, oh, there's a Pillar 2 notification obligation in this country you forgot about. They won't care. They just find you right away.
I know, and that's one of the parts that is very challenging of taxes, because you cannot cover everything. It's very difficult. It's complex, the topic, right? But yeah, I think as an advice, it's good to be perfectionist. I agree. I think for this part, it's good to double check everything, but also being efficient, because at some point, sometimes you can fall into the procrastination that then you never send the memo, because then you feel there is always something to check and to improve, right? So I think we need to balance efficiency somehow. I think managers, I read it somewhere, a manager will perhaps not even notice if your memo is at a 90% perfectionist or at a 60%, right? They might even value more the timing of delivering the memo, being compliant with the deadlines and so on. I'm just guessing, or the conclusion. If there is a typo in the page 8, I don't think nobody will care about that. So just sometimes it's a good comparison of your manager or even the client might not really put so much value if your memo is 90 or 100% perfect, or 60%, 70% perfect. I mean, you need to go to an average, and some standards need to be complete, but I mean, if between 70 and 90 perhaps is not big difference, but it's perhaps one day more of work on your side, right? So I'm not sure. Just guessing. I tell this to my team because I feel sometimes that depending on the character, there is people that they are reluctant to share. No, but I'm still reviewing, and searching more and more. And then, yeah, okay, let's share it. And then there is always time to double check. I mean, if this is a tax return, you need to, but that's why you need to have at least different reviewers in the process for a tax return, for example. So you have accounting team, tax advisor. These three teams should be sufficient. And then if there is something miss, okay. I mean, everybody commits errors. That's fine.
So, and also, where do you see our industry going? As like with you've spent time, you've had experience, you've seen the industry change. Where do you see it going? And then do you have any advice for like the industry leaders who are setting the standards and setting the objectives for the next like 10, 20 years?
Tax industry, you mean, right?
Yeah, tax industry.
Yeah, tax industry, I think we will need to be very close to AI.
Yeah.
I think we need to be super close. Some people are trying to close eyes, but definitely we need to be super close, same as lawyers, and try to be as efficient as possible. I think definitely automation, AI, and tax technology are key drivers for the next years. Together with tax accounting, I think tax reporting with Pillar 2 and so on are key expertise areas that we need to focus on. And I think until now, nobody has been really focusing on well, at least globally, right? So perhaps in the US, tax reporting might be more key, but not everywhere. So we need tax reporting expertise, tax technology expertise. So we need AI experts that can help tax teams to improve and automate the processes and save time. I think that's the future for sure, and be very close to, I think also remote work, it's important to monitor. I think OECD and EU are going a bit late here, but after COVID, I think everybody is a bit more flexible in remote working, and many companies are, not all. Some of them have gone back to not non-remote work, but I think also having people all around, it's something that is really evolving, and we need tax authorities to comment on that and to understand and to be a bit more flexible, because currently you cannot have a P risk everywhere if you have people, right? So we need to put some sort of rational and materiality on the real risk.
Yeah.
Not challenge remote people just because they want to work, I don't know, 6 months from or some months here, some months there. I mean, internally in the companies, we try to put guidelines and set some boundaries, but it's difficult to control everything. In all companies I've been, it's the same problem. Big ones, not so big. So yeah, I think remote, and after COVID, definitely it's really growing.
Correct. Yeah. I think I really like your point of like how the professionals will have to adopt AI. I think there's so much upside for like professionals adopting. I know like tax people haven't been like the most tech forward, but like there are people who are adopting, and I think like the people who will adopt will get so much more work done, and I think it will like really help. I wish I had all these technologies when I first started. I remember doing like an ECI, effectively connected income like question that took me like 10 hours to get through one day, because one, I had to learn what effectively connected income was as a staff, and then two, understanding how it would impact different jurisdictions coming into the US. So I think life has become changing, but it is also becoming helpful.
Yeah, exactly. It's providing with more support for everyone. But I think it's good to understand the grounds. And everyone says that I think AI can really support better the people that really have better knowledge and more senior. So that's why for you, it takes not so long time, but perhaps, I don't know, a trainee might even don't get the right answer because the question is not formulated properly, whatever. But I think having the right expertise is exactly where you need to get that support in that senior levels. But yeah, definitely. I also use it. Well, I try to use it more and more because we are getting very pushed even by my company. So they say, what are you using AI, whatever. And the more I get pushed, the more I use, but also it's very, very helpful, right? And even because it's challenging for ChatGPT, right? For example, the source of the information of ChatGPT is internet. This is not contrasted. This is not up to date. We cannot rely on that. But if you go to some platforms, tax platforms like Thomson Reuters we are using, or IBFD, I guess, but I know Thomson Reuters we use in my company, and then they have a sort of a ChatGPT. So you ask question specifically, and the question you have an issue about BT in one country and the other, how you can optimize and so on, you get the answer. And this is trustful source of information. So you get the information from trustful sources in Thomson Reuters platform, right? So this is right information. So you can rely on the conclusions more or less, despite you will double check more things and so on. But for a quick response, I think it's super helpful. At least in my view, it's really been very, very helpful. And for sure, like PowerPoints, conversion and emails and all these things you can use until you are tired. So I think the more you use, and the more you use, the better the outcome is, right? So, and I also use ChatGPT for typical questions, right? But I think when it comes to tax analysis, we need to be very careful with this ChatGPT.
Yeah. And I feel like the industry is getting like there's so many more products coming out, and I'm like really excited to see how like we change and how it like affects us overall. But thank you so much for your time today, Clara. It's been like great getting to know you, great conversation, and feel like you have so much experience and like you've impacted so many people's life, especially in the tax sector. So thank you for having us up. Thank you for being on today.
Thank you, Adam. Same, guys. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Yeah, Bruce.